right, everybody. Welcome to this lunch session about the very interesting topic MMM. So, recent years, MMM has been even more important tool in order to understand how you should optimize your marketing investments. And without further ado, I would like to present Carlotta, which is leading our MMM team at Nepa. And she's going to walk through and demystify MMM for us today. So, Charlie, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Welcome. Hope you enjoy your lunch meanwhile, and also warm welcome to those of you who joined online. And my name is Charlotta, as you heard, but I'm also called Charlie, just to avoid any confusions there. I'm the product manager for MMM at Nepa. So I will walk you through the topics of today. I assume that the familiarity with MMM, it might vary across the audience. So I think that it's good to start with some basics of MMM. Maybe some of you have worked with it a lot, maybe very hands-on with MMM, and maybe some of you haven't heard about it before. So we'll make sure that we are on the same page from the beginning. And then we will talk about quantifying the impact of both brand performance and marketing performance. And we will talk about how to support the budget decisions and to speak the language of growth, and finish off with your questions. There will be some case studies along the way as well. So let's start. What is MMM? So I know that it can sound a bit silly, but I want you to imagine that you are a manager of a football team. And you have the responsibility to make sure that your team performs. And you have to take into the account all your players' strengths and weaknesses. In addition to this, your players, they have to play together as a team. And on top of that, you would have competitors, and those would also have strategies that you need to handle as well. And you would also have financial resources and interest from your management to take into account. And you would also have pressure from your fans. And there would also be some external factors that you, of course, cannot handle. The weather is a very big external factor for a football game, for example, that could influence the results. So it's quite easy to understand that there are a lot of things that affects your final results of the game. And obviously, if you focus only on your best performing player and your striker to win every game and put all the effort into that person, you would naturally not receive the same results and win the league at the end of the season. So if we transform this football game to an MMM analysis, MMM would be the holistic bird's eye view of the marketing ecosystem. So you as a manager, you would be the CEO, and your different players would be your different media channels and marketing activities, both paid and non-paid. And it would also be online and offline channels. You have the competitors and you have price and promotions if you are, for instance, a retailer. You have the brand equity from your customers, which were the fans. And we have external factors as well. For retailers, that could still be the weather, but it could also be economical factors. MMM helps you to compare the performance across online and offline marketing activities. As I mentioned, both online and offline, across online and offline sales channels as well. So it helps you to compare apples with apples. And in that way, you're able to also allocate your media spend in a better way in order to maximize the goals and the business outcomes. And that's usually also the sales. So I hope that helps a little bit to understand and get another picture of MMM, what it could be in another context. So we have 4 main building blocks of MMM. We have the data, where we use historical weekly aggregated data on marketing spend, the external and internal factors. We also include the business outcomes, which is usually sales, but it could also be a number of customers or number of sold products, for example. Then we have the modeling, where we apply statistical techniques to link the marketing input to the business outcome based on the historical trends and patterns that we see. And we have the marketing performance, which determines each channel's short and long-term contribution to sales and its ROI. And we have the marketing optimization as the last one, where we account for diminishing return of each channel in order to reallocate budget and know where to cut costs and where to increase costs to predict the future and improve the ROI. So what does this mean for you? And what do you get? So with MMM, we prove the efforts of the past in order to improve the future. So a good example is that you should do an MMM when you want to understand the monetary impact of your marketing investments and prove contribution of their efforts to the organization. So you will understand each channel's performance, how they are driving incremental sales, and also how much they cost, and how much they also do this for short-term and long-term, and to get an understanding of the development over time. What happens over time and how do they work together. You can also do MMM when you want to optimize the marketing mix and the investments to evaluate if you should maybe increase the budget, where should you invest more and not, and where should you cut, and also estimate how much sales is required, how much more sales can you get with different level of budgets. So MMM really sounds like the ultimate thing, of course, but there are limitations to all the methods that we apply to our complex realities, of course, and the media landscape is not an exception. So it's important to understand what conclusions you can and cannot draw from such analysis. So MMM is, of course, not a silver bullet. It's very dependent on data quality. So simply put, shit in, shit out. So that will frame, or that's the prerequisites of your output. And the model is not either aware of things that you haven't put into the model. So it's not able to understand or to capture sudden shifts in the market or trends that happens. So that's a slight limitation too. Secondly, MMM is very good at telling us something about the aggregated customer journey rather than the individual customer journey. And it's not either designed for tactical day-to-day evaluations or adjustments like the real-time bidding or targeting. And I also want to add that MMM doesn't evaluate different creative materials either or concepts directly in MMM. But I will talk later a bit about how you can add that to your MMM analysis. So if we go back to the more tactical part in the last bullets, that has at least improved a bit more over time. MMM as a method has been used since the 50s, but very much has changed since then. Both the media landscape and how we do MMM, of course. It's not manual work anymore. Over the past 5 years, it has evolved into a more continuous tool where the models, they are built and trained on new data on shorter intervals, which means that they are constantly shifting, and the historical window for the analysis is much closer to the present all the time, and it's moving. So working with MMM in this way is an ongoing process, and continuously updating the MMM results that will allow you to get ongoing insights based on the up-to-date data, which allows you to be more agile and react to the results, and you can see them much faster, and you can try out things and follow up on them. So we will now look at a case from a banking client. And this client was able to increase the conversion of new client acquisition by timing their investments more tactically. So it's a case of using MMM for more tactical purposes. So here we can see that the client had quite consistent investment levels in this channel, which is the price comparison channel. It's used by consumers in Sweden to compare prices between offerings from banks, but also insurance companies. So what we could see in the continuous MMM results was that the development was the contribution to new clients from the price comparison investment. They spiked when the natural demand increased, which was in Q1 every year. So we can see that the seasonality, the natural demand, the blue one, has clear spikes in Q1. And the contribution to new clients in the green line follows that pattern. So what they did was that they maintained their yearly total budget for this channel, but they spent it differently. So they increased the spend during Q1 and decreased the quarters when the natural demand decreased, which had a very positive effect, increasing the yearly customer acquisition by 6,000 clients in this case. So you can see here that the contribution from this channel still follows the natural demand, the seasonality, but the impact is much bigger. And they could get a lot more out from this. So that was a great example of a more tactical application of MMM, but let's also add the brand effect and the long-term perspective to the marketing. So in recent years, there has been a very strong focus on what's happening in the media landscape and especially the digital channel performance. There is a lot of data available and it's possible to optimize on a daily level. But doing so, the long-term perspective is usually a bit forgotten. So as you know, the branding and sales activation work in synergy and they have different effects over time, which makes it very important to balance those right to get as much possible out from your investments. So branding has a smaller effect short term, making it more difficult to see the relationship with sales. But however, the effects have a slower decay, so repeated exposures builds up baseline sales over time. So you can see that the blue line here has a very small effect on sales, but over time it increases and increases. And sales activations in the black line here, they give large and fast effects, usually within 6 weeks, and the effect they decay very fast and do not carry over time for long. So organizations that spend too little on brand building, they usually fail to build up brand building equity and they don't get out as much from their sales activation. And on the other hand, organizations that spend too little on sales activation, they can build very strong brands, but they miss out on the opportunity the brand to the maximum. And the CMO needs to balance those two right. And MMM can be a crucial guide to do that. So here we have an example with the data from a client who invested in a specific channel. So we have the investment here in purple. Maybe the colors are a bit less clear on this screen here, but we have the investments in purple, and then we have direct impact or short-term impact on sales. So this is the incremental sales from the investment in blue there. And then you can see the brand impact is happening a bit later. And then there's a new investment and you can see that there's a blue short-term effect happening approximately at the same time as the investment. And then there's brand impact happening and then a new investment with short-term effects. And it's steadily growing over time. So the base sales is growing as well. So we can see that if we would exclude analyzing the long-term effect as well, that would have been a bit misleading as well. And usually also the direct effects, they are overestimated if the long-term effects are left out. So balancing the mix right will give you a higher ROI. So we can actually see that from our benchmark that strong brands, they gain much more from their marketing. And more specifically, the companies that have strong brand equity, and with strong, we consider them as being top 3 in their category. in aided awareness, they have an average of 15% media contribution, whereas the brands who has lower brand equity, they have an average of 10% media contribution. And we can see the same pattern for ROIs. So the companies who have higher brand equity, they get 5 times more back from what they invested, whereas those with lower brand equity, they only get 3 times back from what they invested. So we will look at a case again. So this client is a global retail fashion actor, and we helped them optimize their marketing strategy to drive the long-term growth. And we think at Nepa that it's very important to guide the client on a broader level, not just by presenting the results, but also help the client to understand why the results look like they do. And MMM, the basic output from MMM is just numbers. So it really needs some additional analysis in order to do so. So this was a challenge that they came to us with. So our global retail client, they were increasing their spend in media over time and ended up spending 50% more. But the sales spikes were very seasonal and the rest of the sales remained quite flat. They had to spend more and more just to maintain their market share. And this was, of course, very alarming to them, since the client is doing brand tracking and campaign evaluations with us, and also the MMM, meant that we could tackle this challenge from additional holistic perspective in order to answer So looking at the brand tracking data, it was clear that the brand health was suffering. They were steadily losing ground to main competitors and new players in the category. So top and middle funnel metrics were steadily declining. Here we can see the brand consideration, and they were converting to a lower share of target audience from awareness to purchase. The brand strategy had shifted to a very short-term mindset without them noticing it. So that was not in their control. So looking at the MMM results, we could see that they had no balance in their marketing investments. The direct effects and the brand effect share. 60-40 is a quite good mix. And this is not somewhere near this. And the main contribution to their sales in the blue bars here, they came from short-term channels, such as the promotions and the calendar effects like Black Friday week and holiday weeks. And these were also creating the spikes in their sales. So it was very clear that they needed to shift their investments towards more brand-building channels and efforts to gain a balance and avoid losing market share to their competitors. And we also had a lot of campaign measurements done with them. So this is their own benchmark, and then we have a category benchmark at Nepa. So looking at these KPIs from the campaigns, we saw that the client had not managed to utilize their brand assets. So they had a critical sender recall problem, meaning that the campaigns that they had, the users or the customers, they didn't know who the sender was. And thereby they lost sales to competitors, meaning that they were wasting their ad spend. So simply balancing their media mix would obviously not be enough to turn this around. And the creative quality also had to be improved. So we worked with the client consistently to simultaneously balance the media mix and helping them to utilize their brand assets to improve the send recall. And after about 1 year, we started to see some effects. So the continuous MMM results, they showed a strong development in the baseline sales with a slight increase. And the baseline sales is built up by brand equity, among other things as well. So when the media mix is balanced, this is what you can expect for the baseline sales. And the client also saw a positive impact on actual sales that could be partly explained by improving media mix and creative content. And this led to an average yearly sales improvement of 16%, which is quite much if you're a global retailer. And the marketing team could then build a case around this internally to prove the value of brand building efforts, which was important to gain approval of the new strategy and direction going forward internally. So that's one part of it. But also looking forward then, with upcoming budget planning, you need to know where to spend your future money, not only where they went. So as I mentioned before, apart from the numbers that you get from the MMM, the ROI and the contribution per channel, it also opens up the door to scenario planning and the what ifs you may have for your investments. So there are, of course, many different combinations and scenarios that can be done, but I will clarify 3 of them, which are quite useful. So first we have the primary scenario where we have the current media budget to understand how have you performed in the past, and then reallocating the media spends according to the optimized scenarios, which tells you how your channels performs. And you can see where should you move money from one channel to another in order to optimize the ROI. And MMM will also guide you in spend allocation for both budget increases and budget decreases to make sure that you maximize the sales as much as possible. And marketing is also often maybe the budget which is cut first in a crisis. So in those cases, you need to argue for the media budget's importance. And in the event of a decrease, you must minimize the negative impact it might have on the sales. But you can also plan for certain sales targets and thereby understand what media spend would be required to reach that. So that's more of a growth perspective of the scenario planning tool. And when doing this, speak the language of growth, not just the media efficiency, and focus on channel performance. So how do we do this then? Let's look at another example. So here we have an example with a client with a media spend of 56,000 SEK. And they have an average ROI of 0.97. And even if you just optimizing it, it would be possible to make it positive, 1.17 in ROI. And even if you have the ROI numbers, which might be more helpful for the management to understand the effect from marketing, also make sure that they understand the impact it has on sales. So in this case, the media contribution is 21%, which means 54,000 new members per year. This would also help if you, for instance, ask for increased media budget from the management, an increase of 10% in your media budget and reallocation of spends will give you, in this case, 71,000 new members. So proving your efforts with return on your media investments will, of course, help the management to understand how important your marketing is to your business, but also translating that to sales is even more powerful. Just to summarize, MMM is a holistic tool allowing you to compare the marketing activities of different channels and act thereafter. Know what you can expect and not. And balance the short-term investments, make sure that you are building growth over time and not just the short-term wins, and connect it to growth as well. Make sure that your organization knows the importance and power of your marketing. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you, Charlotta. All right, so we actually got some questions here in the chat, so let's roll this up. What do you need to think of when you do an MMM in-house? It's a question from the audience.
Yes, there are a lot of things to consider when doing it in-house. First of all, do research. You need to make sure that you have the costs and also the resources internally. So you need to have more time in order to make sure that your team members who will do the MMM, that they have enough time to also educate internally and to understand. Also make sure that you have enough time for maintenance and updates, and think of the parts of, because there are a lot of decisions to be made during the modeling process. So do you have experience? How should you navigate doing those experiences? What should you base them on? So make sure that you have enough time internally to know what you want to create.
Right. Thanks, Charlotta. So we actually got another question here from Sarah. Thanks for a great presentation. Would you say that MMM is better suited for companies in specific sector industry?
Generally, industry and size of company does not really matter. The most important part is that you have a target variable that you can use, so that you have something that varies over time. For instance, sales is a very good example, so that you have data for all the data points. We have had discussions with event companies. That's a bit more challenging. Then you need to find something else than maybe number of visitors, because then all the visitors may happen in one day, and that doesn't vary over time. So we have no data, and suddenly on one day we have all the visitors. So maybe number of sold products for some company that works, or visits to the web page, something that is varying over time. And also, most importantly, the media investments, they need to have enough variance to be able to find the different impacts for the channels.
All right, so we got one more here. Why has MMM been more popular recent years?
I think it is very much connected to that attribution modeling, which has been used a lot for the digital channels. It's harder and harder to make that efficient because the cookie data is less accessible. So it's not as useful as it was before, the attribution modeling. And then a lot of companies, they turn to MMM. And it's also, we can see a trend in understanding the balance between the online and the offline channels as well, to get a holistic perspective. But I think it happened somewhere there where the cookie data discussion started to.
All right, great. Do we have any more questions from the room here? I have some myself, actually, Charlie.
Sure.
So what do you say? How long time does it take from there's a client coming on, and how long does it take before they actually can start working with the MMM approach and change the way they plan the budget and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's very individual. And firstly, as I mentioned in the presentation, that MMM is very reliant on quality of the data. So also gathering the data is a big part of the process. So it depends on how mature you are within the company to get your data. So that is a timeline which is varying quite a lot. But then we have the modeling, and depending on the need for data structuring, the data structuring and the modeling might take around 5-6 weeks. I'm looking at the team here, and that's of course dependent on how many models you do, or how complex, how many products you have, or online, offline sales, different markets, etc. So the time would slightly increase with number of models. And then there's an analysis layer to that, around 6 to 7 weeks from when the data is in place. And usually our experience is that the gathering of the data, depending on how mature you are within the company, to know where the data is, it might take a few weeks, 4 to 5 weeks maybe. We got a question of what is quality data. It's because now we were talking about collecting the data. So in that sense, it sounds maybe stupid, but many of the companies doesn't really know who sits at the data, where can we find it, how can we export it. That could be a process if that has not already been done at the client side. And quality of data is also connected to the granularity. So if we have monthly data, that's not, in our eyes, maybe that qualitative data. So weekly or daily, as much granularity as possible with as much details as possible.